Hi, today I wanted to talk all about injuries. In the music world, there are a lot of different things to think about when it comes to injury, from injury prevention to things to know when you have an injury, because I feel like a lot of people don't talk about it. There are a lot of stigmas attached to it, so I think there are some helpful things that we could discuss, that I could share, that would help, that if you ever find yourself struggling with any pain or developing an injury, you already have some tools, some thoughts to help start the healing process and to help get back to playing as soon as you can. And so I wanted to start off by talking about why I find this important. So it actually is a little personal because I, years back, struggled with my own injury. It was a performance related injury that was overuse and musculoskeletal based, so it's very similar to tendinitis. And in my experience, I was at conservatory at the time when I had the injury, and it was a little bit long term. It was more than a year that I had it. And I found that there weren't a lot of people who could offer me helpful advice or teach me any tips on how to deal with my situation and how to heal. Even with the great faculty at the school I went to, a lot of the teachers actually didn't ever have a performance injury or any kind of pain related to overuse. There's only one teacher I had who was a guest teacher who had some helpful things to tell me about injury and setup, more about like being a less tense player rather than anything geared specifically towards overuse injuries and anything specific, anything that I could do and take action about so that I could heal better and be able to play faster. Of course, being a less tense player is going to help all around with sound, with preventing injury, with a whole host of things, but I feel that it's important to talk about these things. And another thing is, I feel like in the music world, there's kind of a stigma with injury, especially in the classical music world and in the performance circuit. And I feel like people, especially performers, get afraid to share their experience or ask for help when they have an injury because they're afraid that organizers, anyone who's employing musicians, are not going to want to hire those who are either struggling with an injury or have in the past, out of maybe an assumption that employers don't want someone who could potentially need a break or unexpectedly need to find a substitute because they find that they're in pain. Rather, I feel like once you experience having an injury and figure out your body, figure out how to get through something like this, I think it makes you a better player because you learn what's good for your body, what's not good for your body. You learn how to take care of yourself, and then you could actually improve your sound. And as I was mentioning before, with being a less tense player, I think a lot of people who get successfully through an injury and heal and are playing again end up developing tools and changing their setup, changing how they play, that actually sounds more relaxed, and it ends up being more effective for their playing overall. And so I find that having an injury, getting through it, teaching yourself what's helpful for your own body, it's really important, and I think it makes me a better teacher, it makes me a better performer now that I've experienced my own kind of injury and recovery journey. Next, I want to get into some injury prevention tips. A lot of people, when they think about injury prevention, or any conversation I've had before about injury prevention, has started with warming up and how to do that healthily so that we have our blood coursing through our veins and our body is warmed up and it's less likely for us to strain something or overuse a muscle when we're just starting off cold. And so the idea of stretching is you want to warm up your muscles, make sure that they're flexible and elastic before you start playing, much as an athlete would warm up before he or she does their sport, or if you're working out, before you work out, a lot of people stretch, or before you jog, a lot of people stretch. And I actually had a really interesting conversation with a specialized occupational therapist when I had my injury. I saw her because she works specifically with musicians. That's her specialty. And she has a degree in piano performance. And so she knows intimately what it's like to be a performer, what it's like to be a musician, what muscles we use, all of the small muscles and tendons that are involved in music playing. And she told me something really interesting, and it got me thinking about warming up and stretching. And she said, when your body is cold and you start stretching right away, you're more likely to end up hurting yourself. And I thought about it, and it made a lot of sense to me. So, muscles are elastic and flexible, and it's kind of like imagining a rubber band. Rubber bands and muscles, I feel like, share some similar properties. And so, rubber bands, you can stretch them, you can extend them, and they can go back to their original shape. And if you imagine a really cold rubber band, almost as if you had frozen that rubber band, then you try to stretch it out, it's probably more likely to snap on you. Rather than if you have a room temperature or even hotter rubber band, it's probably a lot easier to stretch safely without snapping or breaking. And I think the same is about muscles. So when I was talking to this therapist, this occupational therapist, it made a lot of sense to me what she was saying about stretching. It's better to actually already have a warm body, to have your blood and your circulation going already, your blood flowing through your veins. And so she suggested to me actually just getting your heart rate up, using some kind of cardio, anything to really get your heart working, to get it pumping blood throughout your entire body. So she suggested to me that I could jump rope or do jumping jacks even, something that utilizes the whole body, not just the legs or the upper body, but the whole body. So I like to do jumping jacks for at least a minute so that my heart rate's up, my blood's pumping, my body feels warmer, and I'm starting to feel like my body temperature has increased. Kind of like when you work out or you jog and you can feel your body getting warmer because your circulation is going and you're sweating. The whole point is you want your muscles to be warm and your blood, when it's warmed up and when your body is active, it helps your muscles to be warmer. And then that's when you want to start stretching. And so I think that was a really helpful thing for me to learn about stretching, about warming up, about injury prevention that I don't think people talk about or even know. And so that's something that I found really helpful that I did want to share as kind of general advice for anyone looking to have a healthy, safe, good warm-up before they even pick up the instrument. Another thing that I hadn't really thought about until I had my injury and talked to physical therapists is being hydrated. So it's important for anyone to be hydrated. I think this is something people have been talking more about recently, and I think in the wellness community, among communities of people who like to work out, it's becoming more and more talked about how important it is to stay hydrated. And same with music, and especially with injury prevention, is if we want to keep our muscles pliable and flexible and we want to keep our bodies healthy, then we need to be hydrated. Kind of like if you think about something brittle versus something that has water content in it, the brittle one is easier to break. If you have anything that's dehydrated, it's going to be easier to flake off or break versus if you have something that has contact with water or is soaking up water, it's going to be a lot easier to manipulate it and for it to be pliable. And so I think the same thing for muscles again. If we aren't hydrating ourselves and our water content is getting low, then it's easy for our muscles to be dry. It'll be easier for them to metaphorically break or be overused. It's easier to get to that point versus if we stay hydrated. It's kind of like having a lubricant, and it's easier for your muscles to be flexible and moldable if you have that lubricating quality, which is the water. Next, I wanted to talk about what to think about and what to do if you're stuck in an injury. If you find yourself having pain, what do you do next? What are your next steps? What are some helpful things that you can actually do in that moment? So, something that I think is a bit of a misconception with performance injuries is that when you're taking your time away from your instrument, you need to rest, that you don't have any contact with your instrument, and you need to be completely pain-free before going back to your instrument. And to add onto that, I think the misconception goes that while you're getting back to playing, you need to be completely pain-free as well. And I think that was misleading to me, and it was confusing because a lot of the time I would spend a month on rest once my pain had come back. It came back a couple of times before it finally went. And I was confused because even when I had that rest, 3, 4 weeks later, I still had some pain, and sometimes it got even worse, even though I wasn't playing at all. And when I got back to playing, sometimes it would be pain-free, sometimes pain would come back, and I didn't have the understanding of how to deal with that and what that meant about my body. And so I think the thing that helped me a lot is one of my mentors who told me that when I'm going back to playing, or when I'm resting even, my metric doesn't have to be pain or no pain. It's not black and white like that. It's more that once I get to a level in rest that my pain isn't getting worse or better, but it's stagnating, that's a good time to go back to the instrument. And I find that in the beginning of the injury, or if it comes back, it flares up again, it's usually the first couple of days to the first week that you're struggling with the most of the pain. And after that starts to decrease until it stagnates, and it might even get worse if you aren't using those muscles and it's atrophying and they're getting weaker. And so some of the things that used to be normal for you start to hurt when you do those things. And so that's the thing. We don't want our muscles to atrophy, and it doesn't make sense to wait until it's completely pain-free because sometimes it never gets there, especially if it flares up again and it's not your first time around having this injury. And so the helpful advice is that once you've gotten past that initial flare and it's died down a little bit, even if it's not completely pain-free, start playing again little by little. Sometimes it might even just be a minute to 5 minutes at a time, maybe even less than 5 minutes a day. The important thing is to be patient and to really pay attention to your body. And you only want to stop if your pain gets worse. If it stays the same from what it was before, that's fine. And it probably wouldn't have gotten better anyway if you had pain to start with and it was already stagnated. So the point is we want to keep our muscles in use, and we want to make sure that our muscles aren't atrophying or the muscle mass isn't decreasing from what it was before. And I actually had a peer at conservatory. His dad was a physical therapist. I don't think it was specialized to music or anything, but his dad is a physical therapist. And when that peer of mine had his own bout of physical injury related to music, it was a performance injury, I think it was tendonitis, his dad instructed him to do a bunch of stretches and muscle exercises even if he had a little bit of pain, and he was able to get back to playing, eventually pain-free, pretty easily. I think within a couple of weeks he was fine. And so I think making sure that our muscles are in use, but not to the level of overextending it and flaring up our injury again. I think safely monitoring the use of our muscles and continuing to exercise them is really crucial. It's really beneficial. And that was something that really helped me too. And so every week that I was getting back to playing, once I knew this, I was paying attention to my pain. Was it getting worse? Was it okay? Was it staying the same? And if it was staying the same throughout the practice session and after, or getting better, as in the pain wasn't as great during my playing or after, then that meant that that time frame, whether it was 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 30 minutes, was good for me. I was able to do that practice session, and I would do that for a week. Then the next week, I would increase that time and pay attention to how much I could take. So the last thing I wanted to add for anyone who finds themselves having an injury is just to keep track of your diet. So an injury, when it's overuse and it's musculoskeletal, typically what's happening is your muscle has been inflamed because it's been used to the point of basically breaking. It can't take it anymore, it's overextended, and your body's telling you when you have pain, you've reached a level that you need to stop. You need to come back, or you need to reevaluate how you're doing this activity because how you're currently doing it is not sustainable. Whether it means changing your setup, how you hold your instrument is what I mean, or how you're using your bow or your left hand. Are you holding a lot of tension where you don't need to? And one of my teachers, the one who had the nerve injury and healed from it, his advice was to pay attention to where I hold tension that's necessary for playing and what I do that's unnecessary in terms of holding tension. And the idea is we don't have to be tense players, but in order to hold up an instrument, for example, like a viola or violin, or to do anything really that requires picking anything up, doing an activity, your muscles are working to hold that up and keep it up. And so that's what I mean by holding tension. It's not necessarily holding it tensely, but your muscles have to be working and they have to be active in a way, whether it's flexing or whatever it is, to do what you need to do. Versus if I'm holding it, but a muscle that's not necessary to hold it up is being tensed, let's say it's the elbow that I'm tensing, or my bicep, like I'm tensing it for some reason and it doesn't need to be, that's the unnecessary tension. And this mentor was telling me just to figure out the most relaxed I could be without dropping the instrument, essentially, without interfering with the sound I wanted. And that was really important for me to think about. So going back to this idea of inflammation, it's basically your body telling you you've used your muscles in a way that you can't keep doing, and it's at a point of being so overextended that it's swelling. So that's what the inflammation is, it's swelling of the muscle. And when you get pain, the inflammation has been going on already, but it's to a point that it can't keep going. Your body can't take it anymore. That's when you get the pain. And that's why when you have tendinitis or something along those lines of a musculoskeletal performance injury, usually you might actually visibly see your arm, your muscle, whatever it is, swell. And so the first time I ever had this injury, my arm swelled a lot. My hand was way bigger than the other, and I could visibly tell a difference. And so that's something to think about. And the reason why I talk about inflammation is because there are certain foods that cause inflammation in the body for the average person. And that's typically sugar is a big one. And if you're having an injury or you want to be preventative, the best thing is cut sugar as much as you can, white sugar. And really any kind of sugar. If you're having a ton of fruit, like way more than a normal person would eat, that's going to affect your sugar levels. And so it's good to have everything in moderation, but especially with sugar, and to limit that if that's something that you tend to eat a lot. The other thing is, I think an obvious thing as well for anyone thinking about eating healthy, is anything like deep fried, that's really oily, that sort of thing is also going to affect your body inflammation. And so you want to eat things that are vegetable based, that have a lot of fiber, that have a lot of nutrients, vitamins, antioxidants, and that's really going to help your body to break down inflammation and to not keep staying inflamed or even get worse. And I found that when I paid attention to my diet and moderated a lot of things and cut down a lot on sugar, and quick side note, that can include anything from adding sugar to a recipe to paying attention to what foods naturally have more sugar. White bread has a lot of sugar in it, or white rice. If you're eating rice, you probably want to eat more brown rice rather than white rice. And pay attention to things that will have more fiber in them rather than simple sugars or carbohydrates. And so those adjustments that I made to my diet, I did see a difference in how I felt physically, feeling better, in how my body was responding, in my muscles as well. And in the long run, I think for health for anyone, it's a good idea to watch what we're eating. But I think it's also good to give yourself a little bit of flexibility. It's okay to sometimes eat things that aren't the best for us if we want to enjoy a snack or dessert. And I found that if I cut off sugar versus eating a minimal amount of sugar, it didn't do much for the inflammation levels and what I was feeling my body respond to. So if I chose to maybe have a treat now and again, it wasn't going to make a huge difference. It's more like the things that we habitually eat on a day-to-day basis, the things that make up our diet day to day. And so a treat once in a while, a nice snack once in a while that might have a little bit of sugar in it, that's okay. It's not gonna make or break anything, but if we're eating consistently a lot of sugar every day, then that's really going to affect our body, and it's going to inflame muscles and parts of our body that we don't want to have inflamed. And especially if we're having an injury and we're finding ourselves in pain, it's good to think about how we can make lifestyle adjustments that aren't going to add to our problem, because the goal is to play again, right? And we want to be healthy, we want to have pain-free playing and practicing, and so anything that's going to help reach that goal is going to be something that we want to pursue. And so healthy eating, it's not the easiest if we're used to eating certain things, but it's worth it on many different levels, even for pain-free playing, but also just for having a balanced diet and lifestyle and feeling better in general. So those are a couple things that have been on my mind that I've wanted to share about injuries, about prevention, about some things I've learned that I think aren't as talked about. And my goal is to help and to provide tips and advice that is useful to people, even if you're not in music. And so if you have any more questions, if you want me to cover anything else or share any other thoughts, please drop a comment below. I might make another part to this video if I find that there's more that I want to share. And I'll try to get to all the questions and thoughts that people have. Also, feel free to drop a comment if you want to share anything that you find helpful for any other people watching this video to learn that has helped you get to a healthier lifestyle, prevent injury, even get through an injury. The goal is to help one another and to have this kind of community to support each other and to individually be able to play the best we can, practice the best we can, be the best musicians and the best players that we can possibly be.